Ah, Balatro. What could be more deck builder than a deck builder based on a classic 52 card deck? Those with a passing familiarity with poker and its associated probabilities will pick up the gist slightly faster than those without. In Balatro, you'll be putting together flushes, straights, and full houses in order to score increasingly eye-watering amounts of points and progress to the next round, before your small number of hands and discards runs dry. And dry really is the name of the game here. Even though I just described the game in terms only familiar to those well versed in Texas Hold'em, there are no betting or bluffing strategies to be found here. No. Where the game gets its real zest is from its titular Balatro, or as they're more commonly known, jokers. In between each round, a visit to the shop allows you to spend your cash on rule-bending jokers. Each one has various enhancing properties, amplifying your score when putting together hands which meet certain prerequisites, bolstering your ability to generate cash during rounds, or something more eyebrow-raisingly interesting. Alongside jokers, there are also planet cards, which increase the value of a certain poker hand, tarot cards, which put the fortune in fortune teller, transmogrifying cards into value-generating monstrosities of their very own, and of course, actual card packs, which offer the sweet satisfaction of ripping shiny wrappers and pilfering the contents for some glossy new cards to slot into your deck. Perhaps intentionally, this also gives a glimpse into a hellish corporate nightmare of what playing cards would look like if they were proprietarily owned by Hasbro.
Oh, sick! I just got an ultra rare red sealed glass 3 of spades. Nan's gonna be fucking reeling when I drop this on her when we play bridge at the weekend.
Suffice to say, it's a pretty neat feeling as you forge your newest creation into a point-spewing machine, obliterating your way through blind after blind, ante after ante. And all this is accompanied brilliantly by the satisfying riffle of cards being shuffled and dealt out with the finesse of a veteran croupier. Nary a risk of a stray card slipping from a botched shuffle between errant fingers. But the stakes always raise exponentially ever higher as you confront the inevitable truth that the house
always wins.
Thankfully, a run is deemed successful as long as you can beat ante 8, complete with its own boss-like modifier. And just like that, Jimbo claims another helpless soul. If your brain is as hopelessly warped as mine is, this tight gameplay loop will see you coming back for just one more run, over and over again, and Balatro serves up fresh helpings in spades. Once you beat ante 8, you'll unlock higher stakes, which adds a difficulty modifier to your entire run. And as you get to grips with more decks, which each offer their own twist on how a run plays, you'll unlock even more decks, which also come with their own stakes to slowly climb the ladder. There's even a challenge mode, which really pushes the boat out on what Balatro can ask of the player. How about a run where your whole deck is glass cards? How about a run where cash limits your multiplier? How about a run where you can't buy any jokers? Oh. Before I address that bombshell, let's give the game a rating. Balatro is truly the diamond standard, a simple conceit executed in spectacular fashion, exploring every nook and cranny of its design and offering a wealth of replayability. But you do kind of have to already know that you're going to love it. It boils down to a glorified calculator at its core, and if numbers going up doesn't make your insides tingle, Balatro is going to be kinda dull. Take a game like Dicey Dungeons, which I highly recommend. It has a pulpy TV game show aesthetic, and combat encounters are packed with enemies as lovable as they are memorable. Stripped down to its most base elements, Dicey Dungeons would pretty much resemble a video gamified Yahtzee, which, don't get me wrong, a decent number of people still would have enjoyed, likely me among them. I just think that means Balatro shrinks the size of the net it casts out when fishing for a player base. You'll quite literally be spending your entire playtime with nothing but that gently spinning hypnotic void of colour and an endlessly cycling single music track to accompany you. And I think that puts off a fair number of people that need a little more to entice them into joining Jimbo's club. In fact, the game is such a blank canvas of theme that other IPs have been added since the game's release to substitute for the amorphous silhouettes on the face cards. So for that reason, I can only give this game 4.5 stars. Completing Balatro, however, is an entirely different beast. So, back to the challenge mode. As of writing, there are 20 challenge runs to complete, and I would say it's definitely worth doing all of them, as each one promotes a new way of thinking about the game, where some jokers become wildly better or worse than on a normal run. Except for one. The last challenge. The Jokerless challenge. This challenge takes what is Balatro's central conceit and rips it out. Sure, there's still a shop, but your strategic options for victory have been so deeply limited. You see, each round has one of these tags attached to them, and you can either skip the round and get the bonus from the tag, or play the round as normal. The problem is, from a game design perspective, actively encouraging the player to skip actually playing rounds of Balatro is counterintuitive. So in order to counterbalance this, most of the tags are fucking shit. Most of the game, therefore, is learning which tags are valuable depending on your current situation. But eventually, you learn that aside from a select few, most of the tags are not worth skipping around for because of the loss of economy, and the loss of the shop to improve your deck. When attempting the Jokerless run, you have lost access to one of your most powerful and most interesting assets. Now, you have to rely on randomly being given a more favourable starting tag, so that your run has a decent chance of even getting off the ground. Which means you will waste time restarting over and over and over again, until you see one of the better tags, and you can actually attempt to run the challenge. Which is really fucking boring. This issue is amplified by the other terrible part of completion, namely the gold stickers. You see, in order for completion, you also need a gold sticker on every single joker. There are 150 jokers in Balatro, which means, at a bare minimum, with perfect probability, you would need to do 15 gold stake runs with unique jokers every time, and win all of them. Of course, this is not how this works. Some jokers are much better than others, so even after beating all 15 decks with gold stakes, you will be nowhere near achieving every gold sticker. In fact, 5 of the jokers are legendary, and can only be found from a Soul Spectral card, which itself only has approximately a 1.5% chance of appearing in a Jumbo Arcane pack. Prior to this, Balatro has done a magnificent job of slowly incrementing difficulty, each new stake adding modifiers which initially seem insurmountable, but gently encourage refinement of your strategy. But praying to the gods of RNG that you need be blessed and gifted one of the last few jokers that you have left to slap a gold sticker on is a step too far. Oh, and you better hope to fuck that when you do finally get one of these jokers, that it hasn't come with a handy-dandy rental or temporary modifier, which at the start of a run might as well be a massive middle finger that you'll have to restart your run again, since losing a joker slot to a debuffed joker or tanking your economy are death sentences. So what ends up happening is sitting there, endlessly refreshing your game, hoping that you'll be given the ideal conditions to even make an attempt to tick a joker off your list. The last 10 jokers that I had to do to finish this achievement was so unbelievably mind-numbingly irritating. I literally sat there and watched an entire season of The Legend of Vox Machina whilst I was trying to do this. And thank God I had something entertaining to watch, because sitting there and just holding the R key, which, by the way, for anyone attempting this, if you hold the R key, it resets a run. You don't have to go into the start menu and hit restart every time. Thank fuck, because that also would have been fucking garbage. Oh, it was just an absolute nightmare and a waste of time. A waste of time. This is no longer a game where you make interesting decisions to navigate through a run with player agency. It is monotonous, it is repetitive, and an unstimulating exercise in tedium. And it's why Balatro rightly deserves a 2 out of 5 for completion. Do not bother. Okay, somewhat suitably, let's move on to what I would consider to be a brilliant, beautiful palette cleanse of a game. If you find yourself a little tired of genre tropes and the same olds in different spheres, Signs of the Sojourner is going to be such a breath of fresh air. Made and developed by Echo Dog Games, this is a narrative-driven deck-building game, so a much more distant cousin to the likes of those deck-building games. Whereas Balatro simply has you chasing higher numbers for higher numbers' sake, Signs of the Sojourner's card play instead attempts to actualise conversation. There are no health bars, no mana costs, no scores. Rather, you'll listen, observe, clarify, and accommodate the many conversation partners you'll meet during your travels to better understand their perspectives, wishes, and backstories. In doing so, you'll often incidentally stumble across solutions to your own problems, namely the objective of keeping your hometown of Bartow as one of the stops on the local caravan route that drives through every couple months by keeping your recently deceased mother's shop healthily stocked with goods from neighbouring settlements. Your sole means of achieving this is through communal integration, rather than the much more well-trodden path of forceful intervention. You will never come to blows with anyone you disagree with. There is no combat. But the game still finds numerous ways to test you on your journey. For instance, people's first impressions of you will often be coarse affairs, as you haven't yet learned how best to speak with them. In fact, your entire first playthrough will likely feel like a frustrating uphill battle, like driving on a road littered with crevices and potholes, a feeling fellow Northern Englanders will know all too well. But this is definitely a trip worth taking, and I highly recommend it, especially when it's on sale. You can even play the first chapter of the game for free, and I will post that link below. The game opens with a short prequel, 15 years prior to the narrative proper, which functions nicely as an introduction to your character's history and the basics of how playing cards successfully and unsuccessfully works. And already, the way in which this game delicately intertwines form and function blossoms before you. There are only 2 suits present here, circles and triangles, and immediately a sense of conversational flow emerges as you and your childhood friend take turns playing cards to form a chain towards ironing out a childhood spat. A scenario I'm sure brings back some long discarded memories of our younger years for all of us. And just look at these cards. How many card games have you played which have cards that look like these? Magic the Gathering has a lot to answer for. Not only are these cards as delightfully abstract as their subject matter demands, but even this format of playing them side by side to slot together like dominoes. It's such refreshing innovation. Anyway, where was I? After this short tutorial, and a leap forward into adolescence, your character is more or less free to try and carve out whatever path forward you see fit. The heart of Signs of the Sojourner lies in its many interpretations of change, and how we affect that change upon one another, knowingly or not. Over the course of the game, you will make 5 trips out into the world, venturing further into its corners, more than likely for curiosity's sake, and meeting up with people new and old. After speaking with someone, you are given the opportunity to change your deck, adding one of the cards that your conversation partner used in lieu of one of your own. If your initial conversations did not go over so well, on a subsequent trip, you may have become more well versed in the industrious and creative-minded folk of the Aldhurst, or better able to weather the stubborn and forceful perspectives of old Marai. But in doing so, you will likely find yourself unknowingly making concessions, as upon return to Bartow, those that conversation once flowed so easily with have unwittingly become more averse to your new mannerisms. This felt like a particularly bittersweet commentary on how, for those of us lucky enough to have moved away from the nests our parents built for us growing up, things had felt like they'd somehow changed. When finally reconvening with old friends you'd had every intention on seeing regularly, jokes, opinions, and observations suddenly weren't connecting in the same way anymore. And ultimately, this is nobody's fault. We are all the product of our environments, and as our environment changes, and our social circles along with them, so too do we, despite our best intentions. Such stark changes are not limited to just the people of Signs of the Sojourner. The world itself also shifts in meaningful ways, which I won't spoil. What I will say is that returning to destinations that felt static and dependable, only to see new developments, results in some of the game's best moments. Signs of the Sojourner has many endings, typically depending on who you've consistently spoken to successfully the most often. It's interesting that several of these endings offer some piece of your mother's vibrant history that you can only build a more complete picture of across multiple playthroughs, suggesting that imitating such a task in real life would be a fool's errand. The feeling I took away from this is we all touch so many others in our lives that it would take several lifetimes more to fully comprehend even one person's sphere of influence from an outside perspective. This left me with feelings of melancholic wistfulness long after I'd put down Signs of the Sojourner, that our time is a currency to be spent, but also spent well. 5 out of 5. Completing Signs of the Sojourner largely involves unlocking a decent number of the game's possible endings, although not all of them for some reason. But hey, I'll take what I can get. As excellent as the game is, repeating the same couple hours to try and reach a new ending does begin to hollow out the narrative's sincerity, especially when you can't even skip the game's tutorial. I must have done that about 20 times before securing the last achievement. A couple of the harder endings require some level of luck when being offered which cards to upgrade your deck with, and which cards your opponents have actually decided to play. The game only has auto-saving, and is also fairly immune to save scumming, as quitting out of the current conversation locks in your deck's order, so upon reloading you can only try playing your cards in a different order, rather than a fresh reshuffle of both decks. This leads to some playthroughs being made unwinnable, as failing a conversation will make an ending unreachable. Also, after the first half or dozen or so endings, you won't really be doing anything new when attempting the other endings, with most simply requiring you successfully speak to certain characters on each trip. It feels reminiscent of wanting to hold my finger on a page in a choose-your-own-adventure book, except here, I can't just quickly hop back to the pivotal fork in the road and make the other choice. I have to arbitrarily go back and start from scratch every time. Thankfully, this doesn't take an overly long time to do, even with these features lacking that would be helpful for completion, so a fairly tame score of 3.5 out of 5. So there we go. 2 deck builders and 2 starkly different deck builders. Hopefully, at least one of them stands out as something you'll be interested in playing. Particularly, I would say, Signs of the Sojourner deserves a lot more love than it seems to have gotten. I think it's just one where it seems to have flown under a lot of people's radars. I know the development team have said they're aiming to be able to go forward and do more projects. I'm sure more support for their, I think it's their first title, would go a long way. So, yeah, particularly helpful for Signs of the Sojourner if you want to give that one a shot. Balatro, yeah, you know, it's massive. It's probably going to get an update and get even more content. So, yeah, really awesome. Just, yeah, don't complete it unless you really do have nothing better to do while you're watching Arcane or something like that. So yeah, thanks everyone for watching if you've made it this far. I really enjoyed putting this together and comparing these 2 games. Let me know if you like this format. Press the buttons if it so inclines you. That'd be great. And yeah, stay tuned for the next one, when I'll be completing another pair of games and letting you know what my thoughts are. Toodle for now.